ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot, the podcast by storytellers for storytellers, so that we can tell better stories ourselves. As always, I'm your host, Maverick, and today we have back with us our co-host, Andrew, to review the original Spider-Man series from Tom Holland. That's right, we're talking about Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, if you have been following this podcast for an extended period of time, you know that we started off one of our early episodes with the release of Spider-Man No Way Home back when it first came out. So we are going back now, getting those original ones in conjunction with finishing up the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in our review. So this is what you're going to be seeing today. This film was the story, it was 2017, right? So more recent than a lot of the other series that we've been talking about. But the story was by Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daly. And it was also, the screenplay was by the same, with the addition of John Watts, Christopher Ford, Chris McKenna, and Eric Summers. And it was directed by John Watts. So there was a big cast of people involved in the creation of this story in and of itself. And we'll see how well they did. So, Andrew, what is your initial thoughts and rating for Spider-Man Homecoming?
After rewatching this, I was surprised, but I think this may be one of the best Marvel films we've gotten. Um, in general, I would probably put it in top 10 easily, top 5 maybe. I think it's a great depiction of the character of Peter Parker. It has a great arc for his character. It's a coming of age story. It's a question of identity. As for the rating, I was surprised. I gave this an 8.25.
Wow, that is a very high rating. That's big accolades in the rating system, considering that a 9 is perfect. So an 8.25 is pretty dang spectacular. Myself, I was struck as well by how much I enjoyed this film. Rewatching it, I went, wow. And looking at this, it's very different from some of the other Spider-Man movies that have come out previously. And if you look at the backstory to the creation of this film, that was intentional, right? They were trying to do something different with the character of Spider-Man, and you see that reflected in the story that they present today. That being said, I gave this a 6.95, so very close to a 7. Also high accolades. And I looked back at my last review for the other Spider-Man just to see what I got, and that was before the 9 points, but it was a 7.5. So very similar to where this would be if you were to adjust for a 9-point system. And even thinking about it, it made me realize that, and we haven't reviewed the next one, right? Number 2 in the Spider-Man series, but I recalled that one being pretty decent as well. And it struck me because this is probably one of the few series that came out that is a newer series in the MCU that actually has a lot going for it. So it's exciting to see that they still have something like that on the books, and Spider-Man is the accolades that we hope that it gets for a good reason, and we hope it continues to do stuff like this moving forward with the new Spider-Man coming out alongside their newer release, which is Doomsday Avengers. That'll come out soon as well. So hopefully they continue the series in a positive direction. But we're going to talk about the original today. So if you are interested, stay tuned. We'll get into the nitty gritty. But before we do, if you are not familiar with Spider-Man Homecoming, Andrew, you want to tell them what this story is about?
This story follows the events in the life of Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, following Captain America Civil War. So Spider-Man, or Peter Parker, has already been bitten by the spider. His origin story has already been told, and we are now picking up in his day-to-day life in the aftermath of this epic mission he's went on. And as a 15-year-old kid, he's striving for the next big thing. And as he does so, he's constantly trying to save people and report back to Tony Stark or Happy Hogan. And he comes across these weapons that are being dealt and decides to pursue them despite being told to leave them alone and to leave things to higher authorities, which results in tension and conflict between both him and the arms dealers, and then him and as well as his mentor, Tony Stark.
Yep, pretty much. And yeah, they definitely take some of the primary elements, if you will, of Spider-Man in a new direction in this one. Going right off the bat, right, talking about Tony Stark, he takes more of the mentor figure aspect than what we have previously with characters such as Uncle Ben, who is the stronghold for that idea of him mentoring Spider-Man, causing him to come into his own. So you have a different take on that just from right off the bat in the MCU here, and it's a nice fresh take. So we'll get into that today. So let's start off with that opening scene as we always do. You have that scene where you have Toomes, who is this Adrian Toomes, who's this guy who's picking up the wreckage of what remains of New York after it's been demolished post Avengers 1, right? And you see him basically having his livelihood taken away, and he decides to go underground and continue to do his business in the more dirty, shady side of life. What was your thoughts on this opening scene, introducing us to the villain, and then also introducing us to the character of Spider-Man as he is presented post the Civil War film?
I think they were able to take a goofy villain like the Vulture and make him super interesting and compelling right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
I think secondarily, it's not like this should come up in the opener like it did in the last two films we reviewed, Fantastic Four and Superman. But I'm going to bring it up because I think this film does what those two failed to do. It picks up a character's story and it does it so seamlessly. We don't get the origin story for Peter Parker. We're thrown right into the action of his day-to-day life, and we're not given the text scroll or the news broadcast and given an info dump, but we don't need that. One, everyone knows who Spider-Man is, and if they don't, they get that throughout this film, right? He has a conversation with Ned where he says the spider's dead, so we can pick up, okay, he was bit by a spider. We know that his uncle is dead. We know that that was influential. Him and his aunt are kind of living on their own right now, and there's references to that throughout the film. But we don't get any sort of info dump, and yet the movie doesn't suffer at all. Matter of fact, I would say it does better for it. And so I think that's one of the reasons I appreciated this movie so much, especially in comparison to those recent movies, is I didn't feel like I was just being read a piece of text from someone, or there was some contrived news podcast to just help me as the audience who's stupid to figure it out myself. Um, so I really like the intro. That aside, just the way they introduce Adrian Toomes and then the way they seamlessly connect Civil War to Homecoming with Peter Parker having his own little like home video he's making.
Yeah, it's very clearly connected to the other films, and even if it you had not seen the other films, you still get enough of what's going on to pick up with this without having seen the other films too much, right? You get some inklings of important information like Tony Stark, which is probably a bigger aspect, and what you do need, they give you in the little video with Spider-Man where he's going, "Oh yeah, I was just fighting with the Avengers and I was in this big war with these guys. I was so cool, all of this type of stuff." And it was definitely a great way to introduce the character in a compelling fashion, I would say. I personally think this is one of my favorite openers I've seen in the MCU, and part of that I would attribute strongly to one, they don't go to their stereotypical, oh, let's just have everyone reintroduced with their powers and fight some enemy and overcome them, right? They have this interesting development with Adrian Toomes, who he is, why he's there, and develop that just super well. I really enjoyed having that be the backbone for the story. In addition, it just also created such a great way to introduce a character that is traditionally seen as very campy, right? He's just this weird guy with these wings and this green suit, and instead he's this mecha warrior with this super cool abilities to fight people in this machine that he's developed with his allies to, you know, do this lucrative shady business. So I really enjoyed the opener. I thought it was a great start to the film, and it just keeps going from there on out. But let's talk about the man himself, Tom Holland, Spider-Man, Peter Parker. What are your thoughts on him as the protagonist of this film? Is he compelling? Is he not? How do you think they develop him?
I like Tom Holland Spider-Man. He's not. I'll admit he's not my favorite, but I think that for the world that they're building with the MCU, he fits in so well. Um, I think he does really well playing a younger version of Peter Parker. Now, when Tony Stark did call him like 15, or he called him 14, and then he corrects him and says he's 15. It kind of is like, wow, if you're 15, my brother's turning 14, and you look way older than that. But okay.
Uh huh.
Um, I think he can get away with that much more than, say, Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield could,
Yeah.
just because he's got a lot more of a boyish look to him. Um, but even then, I think he does really well giving off this like kind of childish humor that Peter Parker has, right? When he first confronts these bank robbers and he's talking to them, and then even when he's trying to interrogate, um, why am I forgetting his name? Uh, Miles Morales' uncle,
Oh yeah, yeah.
the guy who plays. I'm completely blanking on his name right now, but you know who I'm talking about. The interrogation scene, his interactions with the AI in his suit, his confrontations with Iron Man, everything he does feels very much like something a teenager would do, or how a teenager would respond.
Hmm.
Um, Even the decisions he makes, and then like just little things they throw in there too, right? The stuff with the Death Star with his friend Ned, the way he talks with his friend Ned, or even his recording that's shown to him from Karen, where he's like impersonating different Avengers. It's like, okay, yes, this is all stuff a kid would do. And then I think he also is able to portray the emotions that Peter Parker would have, right? Spoiler alert, the Vulture is the girl's dad that he takes to prom. Like that scene I think is probably my favorite scene in the movie, when he's like opens the door and he's like, hi. Peter Parker's like, oh crap.
Yeah. Yeah. No, even beyond that, one of the things that you see is his motivations in this film are very clearly something you would see from a teenager, right? How do I belong in this world? I want to be associated with this group. I want to be cool, but I also want to do, what I'm supposed to do, and trying to figure out all of the different aspects of his role in life are definitely a thing you see all young people trying to figure out as they start off in life. And so the idea that this is a compelling force for who he is and what he's doing makes total sense. And it's a great push for him as he moves forward into this film. It's honestly a great motivation. I think this one delves less into the like I am in the middle of a conflict because I have no choice. He definitely has a choice in this one, and he chooses to go into danger because he wants to prove himself and show that he belongs in this world of the Avengers. So the ideas that he presents are definitely compelling for the character that he is and the situation that he's in. And yeah, Tom Holland does it very well. Definitely agree with that.
Yeah. And I think that you also, like, in the context of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this is set what, like 8 years after, or it's like seven. I think it's set like technically 7 years is the timestamp they put after the Battle of New York. And so understanding like Tom Holland's Peter Parker was a kid when this all went down. And so these are
Hmm.
people he's looking to and aspiring to be. And so once he gets these powers and he's contacted by Tony Stark, it's like, oh, wow, I can now fight alongside my childhood heroes. And so it just further drives this push he has to join the Avengers and to prove himself, and why he's like constantly texting Happy, which is, I think they do the idea of show don't tell is done so well in this film, because you even have little things like him texting Happy and then scrolling through his phone and just seeing the endless texts where it's just him,
Hmm.
and there's not like a word that's said, but there's so much there.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely this strong desire, and it's contrasted with his appearance, which is very brief in Civil War, but his exuberance to be there, right? And this idea that, oh, I'm part of this team now, and then Tony Stark is holding him back a little bit. Happy's holding him back a little bit, and he goes, "Wait, I wanted to be part of this team. Wasn't that the whole point here?" And he feels like he has to prove himself more to stay part of this group that he really wants to be a part of. That like taste of glory, if you will, really is this thing that he wants more of, and so it's really given him this almost like nostalgia, even though it just happened, for this thing that's occurred, and he wants to continue that. So there's
Yeah,
so many things about even just integrating into what we've seen in the past of him very briefly, making sure that that drives him to where he is currently, being a strong motivating force and creating a compelling character.
yeah.
So what are your thoughts on the villain in this film? Because I think that's really what provides the contrast. Is he is gung-ho to be this ally, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man that's helping out the world, and he's trying to prove it against this threat of Adrian Toomes, also known as the Vulture, by stopping him and his ability to sell these super powerful weapons to people. What were your thoughts on this opposing force? Is Adrian Toomes compelling? Is the Vulture a good villain? What are your thoughts?
I think Adrian Toomes is probably one of the best Spider-Man villains we've gotten. I will admit, I think the Spider-Man movies in general, I think, have done a decent job of taking pretty comic-y characters and making them more interesting, right? You have Doc Ock in the Spider-Man 2, uh, who they make a lot more compelling than just the evil genius with 8 limbs.
Mm-hmm.
You've got in this movie, in the Spider-Man, the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, you've got the Lizard, who is not just this reptilian creature. He's got depth to him. And in this film, they continue that trend with taking the Vulture, who is typically just a man in a green, goofy looking bird suit, and they make
Yeah.
him not only look thematically so much cooler, in my opinion, um, they make his character so much more compelling. And I think in general, villains ought to be characters we can empathize with and yet still disagree with at the end of the day. And heroes could be ones we should also empathize with, but the difference is that we agree with the actions they take. We look at those and we go, at the end of the day, that's the right thing to do. And
Right.
Adrian Toomes definitely is a character you can empathize with, right? At the beginning of the film, there's so much that goes on. And like, I think there's also just foreshadowing that happens too. The simplest thing being him holding that piece of paper that was drawn by his kid and referencing that it's a daughter is foreshadowing later in the film. But also, like, it's adding this weight of responsibility to his character where it's like, I have a family to provide for. And he's just getting steamrolled by the US government and by Stark Industries, who in their
Mm-hmm.
minds, they're probably not even thinking about the implications that this has, right? Tony Stark's probably not thinking about the dump crew that's being sent to clean this up and how he could be ruining their lives because he's so far up this chain of command, if you will. But in Adrian Toome's mind, Iron Man not only created this mess, he's now the one who gets to profit from it. And so he also just sees himself as another Tony Stark. And you get that in that dialogue with Spider-Man later on where he says, "How do you think Tony Stark made all of his money? Selling weapons. I am no different than him. The only thing
Mm-hmm.
that's different between the two of us is that you see me as the bad guy. But he sold weapons that caused destruction and death just the same as I'm doing to make a profit." Um,
Yeah.
and in he also says, "How could like Spider-Man says, how could you do this to your daughter?" And he says, "I'm not doing this to her. I'm doing this for her."
Mm-hmm.
And so it's you don't get the stereotypical, "Oh, I'm here to just cause chaos and death because I'm a bad guy and I'm greedy and want to make money." And I think what's interesting too is when you look at villains, say for like kids' movies, you get villains that are stereotypical like that. Why do we get villains like that? We get villains like that because little kids don't need all of the justifications for why villains do what they do. They are simply needing to identify this is a bad guy. We don't do those things. This is the good guy. He's fighting against them, right? This is basic for like 4, 5, 6 year olds. Once you get to a films for a more mature audience, you need something more than just I'm doing this because I'm evil. Like we know what he's
Mm-hmm.
doing is bad at this point. We want to know why. What makes this villain compelling? And I think um, Michael Keaton's portrayal of the Vulture is just phenomenal, and so much of what he does because he's almost akin to that of like a mob boss. The way that he views things, he has very high regard for family, for respect, for paying back debts, and like he tells Peter Parker, "You saved my daughter, so I'm going to let you off this once."
Mm-hmm.
And just his whole interaction, even with Peter Parker, is like he doesn't hate him. He has a sort of reverence and respect for Peter Parker's character, and like he can empathize with what he's doing, but he still sees him as you're in my way.
Right. Right. And the whole thing, just piggybacking off of that, is like one of the things I love about a villain. If you're going to show someone's backstory, it's so great when they have a code, right? Something that drives them and has limitations to why they do what they do and how far they're willing to go, right? And that provides this contrast where if they do end up violating that or changing that, there is a very good reason for that. Cue Man of Steel, right? Where we have General Zod. He has a very clear code for why he's doing what he does, and the reason he ends up going AWOL completely against his like doesn't and nothing matters anymore is because his entire universe has been completely shattered at that point. And so
Yeah.
that provides an extra cliff that he has now fallen over to lead to the moment we are in currently in that film, right? In this case, you have someone who has a very clear code for how he does things. He has honor, respect, the idea that caring for the people around you is important for how he lives his life. All very core to who he is as a character. And so it's no small thing when he starts fighting Spider-Man. He's going, hey, like, I don't really want to be your enemy, and I don't really want to hurt people. And you even see that in the time where he kills the guy who's on his team. He didn't actually want to kill him. He thought he was using the anti-gravity weapon. He didn't think he was using an actual
Yeah.
gun to incinerate this guy. So, he's this guy that wants to do things the right way, but he's willing to do it the wrong way to achieve his ends. And so that's kind of what you get with the Vulture, and it just creates a very dynamic, very interesting character. Um, yeah, Michael Keaton plays him well. Love the character. I think that for someone who seems, lower tech or less powerful compared to other villains in the MCU, he does very well and really enjoy just seeing him on the screen.
Yeah, and I mean, also understanding like this is the 15-year-old version of Peter Parker. You don't
Mm-hmm.
need a world-ending threat in order to make a compelling story for him.
Right, right, exactly. So, what are your thoughts on it as the story develops? You have it. At first, he finds out there's these guys selling weapons, tries to stop them, interacts with the Vulture, and just continues down this path. He has some pushback with Tony Stark, who's like, hey, really shouldn't be involved in this. This is too high stakes for you. And he keeps going anyways until eventually Tony Stark says, you know what, you're done. I'm taking the suit back. Goodbye. And at that point, you see Spider-Man's left in a situation where he goes, do I continue doing this without the tech that I need to convincingly fight this enemy? What are your thoughts on the development of Spider-Man up to that point and his continued drive to fight the Vulture in spite of these continued obstacles? Do you think they developed that well? Is it compelling?
Well, I think one, you can't really talk about the increase in tensions and the way the story progresses without first talking about Iron Man's character in this film.
Sure.
And I think Iron Man's character in this film is so good. The way that he's portrayed in his interaction with Peter Parker, especially the conversation he has with him out overlooking the ocean when he takes the suit away. Because keep in mind, right? This is after the tail ends of Civil War. And what was Iron Man's motivations in Civil War? It was being responsible for other people's deaths. And what instigated Civil War was Age of Ultron. And he still has those motivations. And you can see that in his conversation with Spider-Man when he tells him, you would have been responsible for those people's deaths. And if you died, that would have been on me. And I don't think I could have lived with that. And so you can even see the fear that he has with this kid. Like, he wants to mentor him, but if he can't follow instructions, then he can no longer be responsible for what happens to him. And
Mm.
then at the same time, you have in that same conversation, Peter Parker saying, I'm nothing without the suit. And in his mind, his identity rests in his connection to this team. And that suit is his connection to Iron Man, his connection to the Avengers. And if you take that away, he's no longer this Spider-Man that he was. And so following that, right, his motivations, he grows as a character, right? Why he fights the Vulture in the rest of the movie is no longer because he's striving to become a part of the Avengers. It's because this is just the right thing to do at this point. And he doesn't even have time to go and contact Happy and Tony. And even if he did, would they even listen to him at this point? Because he's burned
Mm-hmm.
that bridge. And
Mm-hmm.
so you see his character growing and changing throughout this movie until the very end when Tony offers him a role with the Avengers and he turns it down. And he says, I'm not ready for this. I still have growing to do. I still need to be close to the ground and learn. It's almost like I don't want to really comparing him to Superman, but it's kind of like the idea you get in Man of Steel when his dad tells him, I wanted you to grow up with humanity first. And so in his mind, he needs to be on the ground and help the little guy first before he can go and take on these world-ending threats. So I think the tension is developed very well. I think the way that Iron Man's character interacts with Spider-Man is really, really good. It's also like everything in this movie, as far as I can, yeah, almost everything I should say actually, is done in a very natural way and as an outflowing of each of the characters, right? You've got Iron Man, you've got Adrian Toomes, you've got Peter Parker, you've got his Aunt May, you've got his friend Ned. All of these characters they feel very organic.
No, no, I agree, and especially it's highlighted with the discussion that you were just mentioning between Tony Stark and Peter Parker, where he goes, "I'm nothing without the suit," and then Tony shoots back and says, "If you're nothing without the suit, then you don't deserve the suit," more or less, right? That the identity of someone is based in who they are and what they do, regardless of the tools they have around them, and so that is the real like turning point in his character, if you will, where he goes, this is not just fun and games, right? This is not just I give you a super powerful suit and you get to do whatever you want. This is you have to decide what kind of person you are and how you're going to act regardless of the situation. And that's where he has to make the decision to be the bigger man with the tools that he has available to him and continue to fight the Vulture moving forward. So, yeah, Tony Stark's character is great. I think the backstory is helpful, especially for us who are following the MCU, right? Knowing Tony Stark's motivations, why he's doing this. It's not critical to enjoying the film and to appreciating Tony Stark's character as the mentor figure, but it's still a great. He's still a great addition with and without that context. So really, really enjoy that. What are your thoughts on that as the story develops? Right, you see that they're moving away from this Avengers Tower, and they're taking everything away, and the Vulture decides to take that last pile of loot from the Avengers Tower and use it for his own ends. What were your thoughts on the conflict between Spider-Man and the Vulture in that final fight scene? How that all plays out? Did you think it was compelling? And if you want to talk about the revelation there, you can as well.
I thought, man, Adrian Toomes is like me and Maverick when we play Baldur's Gate. He wanted all of that loot.
Okay. It's true. He's like about to run away, and then he's like, "Oh, loot! I'm going back for it."
It's like there's a timer, and we're just like, but there's good loot. um, I really like the revelation. I think it's done really well. It makes sense. And I
And for
think
the
that his
audience's context, this is what Andrew was referencing earlier, where Peter Parker realizes that the Vulture is also the father of the girl he's interested in his high school, Liz.
yeah.
But keep going.
Um, I just think that scene is done so well. The acting of Peter Parker and like he's like in his mind you can just tell he's asking, does this guy know that I know? Who knows what's
Right.
going on? And then he's like, let's go take a ride. And then when they're in the car, the conversation he has with Liz, the girl, like the dad figures it out and he's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, hmm. And then he makes the excuse like we're gonna have the dad talk, and then he tells Peter, he's like, here's what's what. I'm gonna let you off because you know what? You saved my daughter in DC, and I respect you for that. Your
Mm-hmm.
family means everything to me.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, but if you come after me again, I will kill you.
Mm-hmm.
And he leaves.
Yep.
And Peter Parker's just like, holy crap.
Yeah.
I have to make a decision right now. Like, he's going to the airport. I have to stop him. And then he figures out, oh, it's moving day. I have to go. Because he tries to call Happy. If I remember correctly, he tries to call Happy. And then he finds out. And he's like, oh, shoot. That's what he's going after right now. I need to stop him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you get so many elements too where he's still a kid, but he still very much cares about people too. Like he doesn't hate Adrian Toomes.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like at the very end of the movie, he's trying to save him from himself because that suit's gonna blow up. And you get that too, like when he's fighting the bank robbers and they blow up that deli, and he goes in there to save the guy, and he saves the cat too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think they had the revelation was done very well. They foreshadowed it well. They have all these little hints and clues, right? With, oh, your wife's calling you, she's wondering where you are, and then Liz is like at the school, and you don't really see her parents at all. Um, and you have like little references to her dad being away. Um, and then you have Peter Parker's interaction with him, which is done just wonderfully. And then you have the fight at the end, which, right, he doesn't have the suit anymore, so he has to use his makeshift one, his little old like hoodie and sweatpants.
Hmm.
And then you've got the final scene where he's talking to Tony Stark about the events that transpired.
Yeah, no, and I think that in regards to the revelation, it was one of those ones I remembered watching in the theater and being like, "Oh shoot, I did not see this coming." But then just watching it as it progressed, being like, "This makes so much sense," and they were foreshadowing this. I just didn't see it, and so I appreciated it just for that, where they had the very small, subtle things that are great indications that if you had been paying very close attention, you would have caught it. But it wasn't like a critical thing to what he was doing right now. So, why would he care that the B plot of this romance is going to have anything to do with his fight with this random villain? Turns out it's a huge aspect of what he's doing right now. So, definitely a great revelation. And then it progresses from there where he has to further make the decision: am I going to put my life at risk with the guy who's the father of the girl that I'm interested in? I don't know. Adds extra tension there. So definitely, once again, builds well, and then they have that fight on the plane, comes crashing down, and he has. It looks like he could very well die, but he ends up fighting it through to the end and stopping him from taking the tech and even killing himself. So yeah, it was a great fight scene. It wasn't over drawn out. I didn't think it was too excessive, but it was definitely one of those ones where you saw things play out well. And just from an aesthetic standpoint, too, the idea of how Spider-Man was fighting this guy in the sky, and he's not really airborne. He's kind of airborne with his webs, but not fully. It was a great dynamic to see that fully played out how they did with the limitations of that and the strengths of that and everything going on. So definitely a great scene, and then he ends up getting caught and sent to jail and gets invited back to the Avengers and says no. Did you think that
Yeah.
they concluded the film well? Was it really satisfying overall?
Yeah, I like the ending. I think the Peter Parker turning down Tony Stark going, oh, shoot, well, there are actually reporters back there. Let me
Mm-hmm.
propose to Pepper Potts. Um, Such a Tony Stark thing to do, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the fact that he had the ring since 2008, which is when the first movie came out, is insane.
Yeah.
Um, just thinking about what Pepper's thought process is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and
Well,
then,
even just the idea that it's like, one, you've had this from 2008. Why didn't you propose before? Two, you're using this as a plan B to get the reporters out of here. What on earth?
yeah,
Yeah.
um, she became the B plot and she did not like it.
Yes.
And she was like, I could figure something else out. Um, and then even like little comments, just like there's so many little things that they throw into this film that are like, oh, if you hear that, it's like, oh, that's cool to hear, but it also doesn't like distract from the film. Like the comment Happy makes about, oh, you're going to be next to Vision. He's not big on walls or doors. It's like a callback to Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then him leaving and going back home, and then even the end credit scene with Vulture and Scorpion, which I was also surprised at how many Spider-Man villains they had in this film. Right, they had Scorpion, they had Vulture, they had Shocker, and they had Prowler, which is four, which is a lot for one film.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they're planting all of these seeds, right? You get Aaron Davis, you get Adrian Toomes. I forget the name of the Shocker and Scorpion, but
Sure.
I digress. Um, but they're planting all these seeds, and then you get this interaction with Adrian Toomes and Scorpion is very much the character who does hate Spider-Man and wants him dead, and so he's asking him, and he keeps his identity a secret, and he's like, no.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think part of that, right, is he does have a code, but it also could be slightly selfishly motivated too, because he knows Peter Parker was dating his daughter, and so he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't want to endanger her either. Granted, they did move away, so the chances that that's the driving factor is probably low. But it also shows that like he's not vengeful towards Peter Parker at all,
Hmm. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
further adds to his character.
Yeah. No, definitely. Even in that end credit scene, it adds to who he is and what kind of character he is, and makes you go, even though he's a villain, goaded. So, I'm down
Yeah,
for that. No, I enjoyed it a lot. I thought the ending was really compelling, and overall, it was once again one of those films I hadn't seen in a while, and I rewatched it and went, "Wow, I actually really enjoy this film." And there's a good reason for enjoying this film. It's a good reason that this is uh, worth rewatching, in my opinion. So here we are. What
yeah.
were your thoughts on some of those other side characters before we look at the lasting impact of this film? What are your thoughts on? I mean, we already talked about Tony Stark. If you have thoughts on Happy or Marissa Tomei's character as the Aunt May, um, what are your thoughts on them?
I mean, I think the biggest side character is probably his best friend Ned. It's not Harry Osborn, which when I went into this film, I was a little surprised about. But given that um, Norman Osborn is not a big player in the MCU up until this point, I could see why they kept his character out of this, right? The MCU's been around for what, 10 years at this point about. And
Hmm.
so Stark Industries has kind of filled that role that Osborn Industries would have. And so like the only reason Peter knows Harry is because of his dad, and like they grew up together. I don't know how they will introduce them in future projects. Maybe that's how they're going to do some stuff with Doomsday and kind of reset the timeline, or they'll just have Osborne Industries be something that's more up and coming. Whatever they do, I'm sure they will introduce Harry in future projects. But I think Ned was a good balance to Peter's character, right? There's Ned is still living in the I'm a teenager, I go to high school, and he's like trying to ground Peter Parker, and Peter Parker's like, "No, I'm so far beyond high school right now." And he's like, "We have a Spanish quiz. Where are you
Yeah,
going?"
yeah,
So I like the addition, right? He's also like Ned is Peter's friend. They grew up together. Ned is probably the kid that no one really wants to hang out with, even more so than Peter. And there's that scene, right, when he tries to get Peter to dress up like Spider-Man and show up at Liz's party to like give him some cred at school, and he kind of gets bummed about it. And he's like, "I just want to build the Lego Death Star with you." And Peter's like, "I have so many other things I'm trying to worry about right now, other than school. Like I'm smart enough that I don't need to worry about it." So I like Ned's character. Aunt May, best version of Aunt May we've ever got. I say that jokingly, but I also think that she actually adds to this story more than Aunt May has in the past. Because
hmm
in the past, Aunt May was simply a motivation for Peter, right? She's this elderly, like, woman who's not able to take care of herself, and she becomes something that Peter's uh, villains can use against him. Really, she doesn't, as far as I can tell, and especially in the last two Spider-Man movies or series, she wasn't really a character in her own right. Uncle Ben really shone a lot more than she did, and she was just someone that Peter felt responsible for but also had close ties to, almost like Martha Kent in the Superman films. In
hmm
this film though, she was her own character, right? She had her own motivation. She was trying to protect Peter. Peter's still a kid, and she's trying to figure out how to navigate this life of being almost a single mother for this kid that she wasn't responsible for until he was probably a kid. Really, she didn't raise him since birth. And so they have almost this, it's like this aunt and nephew relationship, but it's kind of borderline this mother son relationship too. And then you even get jokes with, right, Tony Stark's like, "There's no reason you should be this attractive," and then he's like, "Actually, no, 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 take that out of the video. That's not appropriate." And Peter's like looking at him like, "What'd you just say?"
You're right.
um, so I appreciated her character. I think again, this movie does really well in certain areas, and with the side characters, they do well too, making characters that previously weren't interesting very compelling. And they did that with Vulture, and I think that did that with Aunt May to an extent too. Right? She's not going to be this major player, but they at least gave her character stuff within her own right, rather than just being an extension of Peter Parker.
Right. Well, and she's also just she has some backstory with him that's indicated in this film, and you don't even get that backstory really in regards to Uncle Ben and whatever happened with him and everything that goes on there. But you see, there's this idea that they're in this together, right? And she's very much committed to that, and so you get the supportive aspect of her while she's also understanding that the world they live in is not one where she is just like, oh, I'm this helpless damsel in distress, but she's very much trying to make this work and trying to make this possible. And so she's a great character. She's obviously developed way more in future films and utilized by that, but they provide a solid framework for her here. And so they provide a great launching point for those future films to build off of. Definitely thought she was great. And then also the dynamic where Peter Parker knows that if she knows that he's Spider-Man, she's going to be very protective and say, no, you can't do this stuff. You're going to get hurt, and really try to shut that down. And that provides this other dynamic in his life where he has this lifestyle of Spider-Man. And he's keeping a secret from everyone other than Tony Stark, right? And then Ned when Ned
Yeah.
finds out. So very good, very compelling. Ned, yeah, also a great character. I don't have much more to say on him other than he also has his own motivations, right? He is that loser at school and he wants that social clout and he wants to be the guy in the chair, right? He wants to be the guy that's helping out Spider-Man and allying him with him to make his life more successful and also get his own kudos as that goes along. So
Yeah.
it's really good. Um, each of the characters really as the ensemble cast is developed very well. I enjoyed watching them, and this is one of those landmark pieces that you look at and go, "Oh my goodness!" Like pretty much every character in this film is well developed for the role they play and is enjoyable to watch, and they have reasons for what they're doing beyond just, "Oh, I am the side character who helps the hero, and so I'm going to help the hero." Haha, that's not what happened in this film. So great all around, and I really enjoyed it.
Yep.
What are
I
your
will say
Go ahead.
there are two characters that I would briefly discuss, right? You've got Liz and then you've got MJ. I like Liz's character as a kind of a starting love interest, if you will, or a romantic interest, I guess is a better way of
Hmm.
putting it for Peter Parker. I think she also has some level of depth to her, and then her relation to Adrian Toomes made her character even more compelling for Peter Parker
Hmm.
because there's this very real struggle for him. I think of all the side characters in this film, I was not a fan of MJ though, and I don't necessarily. It has nothing to do with the fact that I don't like Zendaya as an actor, although that's something else entirely. I just found her character very almost forced. It was the one character in this film that did not feel organic or like she added anything to the film necessarily. Um, and then like you have the weird interactions like where they're talking and they just like have her there and it's like, oh, okay, it could be funny. But I think for a movie that just does so well at making everything efficient and effective and not forcing anything, it that was the one thing that would take me out of the movie at points.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I think that might be a bigger discussion for later on in the series, just because she plays a bigger role as the film series progresses. But
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't have a huge problem with her specifically in this film because she is very much just that side character, right?
Yeah.
Just like
I mean,
Flash is very much a side character who's just there for the humor to make jokes about how stupid Peter Parker is and he's not cool and plays off of that, right?
yeah.
These characters don't really add a ton other than adding a flavor of the character of his high school and the type of people that he's interacting with, and that's what you get with Peter Parker interacting with these characters. So I
Yeah.
didn't have a problem with her in this film. um I could see that she was a little basic. I think I do have problems with her as it progresses to some degree, but at the very least, even pushing back on that i- aspect of it, I appreciated that she wasn't once again the stereotypical damsel in distress you get from other Spider-Man films, where she's just incredibly sarcastic, incredibly blunt character who just does what she wants to do and ignores everyone else, and is a rebellious spirit. I'm like, all right, I think it's a little weird. I don't love every aspect of it, but it's creative and it's new and it's colorful. So, I'll go with it for now.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it didn't really impact my rating because it got an 8.25 from me.
Hmm.
Um, I think it was the one part of the film where I'm watching and it was like, okay, that didn't feel like it was necessary, and it felt a little not contrived but a bit forced because they're trying to build up this character of MJ and they wanted it to be in this film, and they wanted her to be the Mary Jane that will, or not Mary Jane, rather the MJ, because she's not Mary Jane, the
She
MJ for
isn't.
the next few films.
Hmm.
um but
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, I hate the MJ and the Tobey Maguire movies. I think she's so stupid. um Gwen, though, and the Andrew Garfield ones is probably the best that we've gotten in terms of a romantic interest for Spider-Man.
Nice. So, what are your thoughts on the lasting impact of this film? Let's not get too far into Andrew Garfield's world. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts on this one as it lasts? They're obviously making a fourth film in the Spider-Man franchise for the MCU. Do you think that this film is having a lasting impact? Will continue to have a lasting impact? What are your thoughts?
it's weird. It's almost like in recent years, Spider-Man films have kind of fallen off the radar,
Yeah.
um, which is unfortunate because I think this was a film that really called back to the Phase One movies, where it was they were just taking a singular character in a greater universe and telling their story. But everything now is like we want to have these epic movies where it's like mass scale threats that's gonna destroy the world. And you got that with like Captain America: Brave New World and the Fantastic Four movie, and even Eternals too was like, oh, it's a world-ending threat, and we're going to tell a story with 10 different main characters. And even with Doomsday coming out, right? It's just like these epic proportions that we want to deal with. Whereas the original movies were just it's a character who has powers and they're navigating life with those powers, and there are threats that they come across. Um, but despite it falling off the radar, I think this is something that Marvel should look back on and go, this is how you tell a story for a character, especially a character that is a staple of their universe, right? Spider-Man is so basic to Marvel universe, but he was
Hmm.
introduced so late in the game, right? And same thing goes for Fantastic Four, but I think that the stark difference is that Fantastic Four tried to force a lot of stuff on the audience, whereas Spider-Man was just Spider-Man wouldn't tell you his backstory, right? He's just a kid, and you can infer that from the rest of the movie. And Fantastic Four, I think, probably could have learned from this. And I don't know that they really will take notes at this point, given that it's been left in the dust, right? It's before Endgame, and Endgame is like almost as far back as Marvel's willing to reach right now
Hmm.
in terms of referencing events and characters. Um, my only hope is that this new Spider-Man film continues the trend of actually focusing on the character of Spider-Man and his development, especially following the events of No Way Home, in which it's kind of a reset for his character. He's lost Aunt May, he's lost his friends, he's now going to college and embracing his life as the Peter Parker that most of us are familiar with, right? A photographer for the Daily Bugle, J. Jonah Jameson's character, um, probably going to introduce at least some iteration of Mary Jane or Gwen at this point. I'm hopeful they don't go back to Zendaya's character. Um, so, as far
Yeah.
as lasting impact, I don't know that it'll have an impact on the greater MCU, but I'm hoping that this film has some sort of they build off that same trajectory for the next Spider-Man film at least.
Yeah. Well, it's even interesting to look at it as, understand the Vulture in this story is not this overpowered villain who's destroying the entire world, right? He has his own agenda and he's doing his own little side piece, if you will, for achieving his own ends. That doesn't end the world, but definitely has a big impact on Peter Parker's life. And so that dynamic provides the baseline that you can then build from. And to have sequels, it makes sense that if you're going to have a character continue to grow, you need them to have continually greater and greater threats. And so the idea that he has this baseline with the Vulture, which is very compelling, means you have opportunity for growth that makes sense. Versus with, for example, the Fantastic Four, you started off baseline with this character that is a world ending threat. One that they couldn't really even fight. Not very well. And so the idea that you're going to have an opportunity to grow and develop from there is just a lot harder because you've already reached a very high bar. And how are you going to rise above that with the next film? It's just going to be very hard. You're making it very likely that you're going to fail. So I think that this should be looked back as a template for, well, maybe in some aspects of it should be looked back as a template for how you should start off a character. And the fact that they're not looking to films like this as an example of that is a little sad. But,
Yeah.
you know, we'll see. Will they continue to develop things compellingly? We'll have to wait and see for those specific films because they deserve their own rating. But for today, that's Spider-Man. It's what you got. And I think that's the pod. So
Yeah.
that's it. We hope you all enjoyed. We'll be back, as we always are, next week. We hope to see you all then.